This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast
with Tony Bruschi.
Continuing to listen to specific testimony in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. So you don't have to skip around on the massive files. You're welcome to, but we'd like to break it down for you as well. We're now up to insurance agent Taylor Ballard testifying on the 4th of May, 2023. Let's take a listen.
Under oath, let me just inquire briefly. Have you viewed or listened to or in any way been advised of the testimony that has taken place in this trial since it started?
No, sir.
Okay. With that in mind, then, you can go ahead and inquire on direct. Ms. Rawlings, I'll indicate to the witness, please make verbal responses to any questions asked of you and try to avoid speaking at the same time as any attorney questioning you so we keep a clear record. Ms. Rawlings, you can conduct direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. Could you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Taylor Ballard, Taylor-Ballard.
And Ms. Ballard, how are you employed?
I'm a health insurance broker at Ballard Insurance Group in Rexburg, Idaho.
In your role at Ballard Insurance, did you have a client by the name of Chad Daybell?
Yes.
Can you tell us about any contact you had with Chad Daybell in October 2019?
I met Mr. Daybell on October 31st, 2019. He came into my office to inquire about obtaining health insurance for a November 1st effective date because the coverage that he currently had through his wife's employer was expiring that day because she had recently passed away.
So that was for individual health insurance?
Yes.
Did he seek health insurance for anyone else?
For his children, Seth, Leah, and Mark.
And did you have a conversation with him about how he was going to get the insurance on that day?
Yes.
Briefly, what was that conversation?
At the time, Idaho was looking to expand Medicaid to adults beginning January of 2020. And so he made a comment that his income for 2020 was going to look different now that he didn't have his wife's income. And so I told him he was a possible candidate for Medicaid beginning January. And so we just needed to cover him and the children for November and December of 2019.
Okay, and did you have any contact with him following up on his request for that individual health insurance?
Yes. On that same day, I had told him that we don't normally apply people for Medicaid because it's no benefit to us, but given the situation, the nature of his situation, and his wife being a previous client, I told him that I would apply him for Medicaid for January, and we got the coverage for him and the kids November and December. And so on November 5th, I went to Health and Welfare to apply him for Medicaid for January. And the Health and Welfare interface looked up previous income information and saw that the income number that I had given them from him was higher in their records. And so they said that he would not qualify for Medicaid, but rather a tax credit through the individual market. And so I would need to get him individual coverage in January instead of Medicaid. So I texted him on that same day asking him if he could bring me a copy of his... Do you know what? I have my dates wrong. I'm so sorry. On November 5th...
I'm going to object here. I think this is a narrative. I just asked that there be a question asked.
I will sustain that, so let's start over with a new question if you don't mind, Ms.
So
Rawlings.
Thanks, Taylor. Let's talk about after you checked on his income with Health and Welfare, what was the next contact that you had with Mr. Daybell?
Yes, I'm so sorry. So on On November 5th, when I went to Health and Welfare, the income situation, they told me, they said, we think we've got too high of income in here. And so I
object to hearsay, Judge.
I'll sustain that.
What ultimately did you learn and what did you do after going to Health and Welfare?
That he possibly would not qualify for Medicaid, so Health and Welfare asked me to retrieve a copy of his tax return. So I texted him on November 5th asking if he could bring me a copy of that.
Okay. So you reached out to him by text?
Yes.
Did you hear back from him?
Yes.
What communication did you have from him?
He responded and said that he was out of state all week, and so he couldn't, and so he would bring me the tax return possibly the following week.
Okay. And did you hear from him again?
Yes.
When was that?
He brought his tax return in at some point. I did not visit with him that day, but I took the tax return to Health and Welfare, and based on that information, they found that he did not qualify for Medicaid, but rather the tax credit that I was saying before. I got mixed up. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Did you have a conversation with him later in November about the other forms of insurance that were available?
Yes. November 21st, I texted him and asked if he could come into the office so we could talk about those options.
Okay. And what conversation did you have with him at that time?
He did come in, and I showed him the options for 2020, and then it was just going to be for him and his son Mark at that point in January. And then he asked me that if he were to get married, how hard it was to add his wife to his policy.
Okay, so he inquired about someone else?
Yes.
What was your response to that?
I told him that it wasn't a problem to add a spouse, but we'd need to do it within 60 days of the date of marriage.
Okay. Did he indicate anyone other than this potential new wife would need coverage at that time?
Just his son, Mark.
Okay. And was there anything more about the needs of him or his wife on this November 21st date that you discussed?
No.
Anything more about the insurance coverage on the 21st that you can remember?
I just told him that I would email him the options, and he could pick which and let me know which plan he wanted.
Okay. And did you hear from Chad again?
Yes.
When did you next hear from him?
I'm sorry, can I look at my notes?
Your Honor, this witness had prepared some notes in reference to her interactions with the insurance, and she has them here. I'd ask that she be able to review them to refresh her recollection on the dates.
Okay, they'll need to be reviewed by defense counsel first, please.
It's just the one in the clasp is all I want.
I'm sorry. Your Honor, may I aid in an objection to her reviewing these notes? May I volunteer an aid of an objection?
You may.
Ms. Ballard, it looks like there's about 15 pages of text writings that have some footnotes in there. Is that my understanding?
Yes.
And it looks like it's a day-by-day, play-by-play type of encounters with Mr. Daybell. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Is this something you do in the normal course of your business, or was this something that was asked of you by law enforcement?
I was subpoenaed to provide that information.
Okay, and you provided that information to law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay. If I could have just a second, Judge, to confer with counsel.
Yes.
Judge, can we just have a quick sidebar?
Yes. All right, there's been a request to have the records used to refresh the witness's memory. They've been reviewed by counsel. I don't know, were they supplied to the witness at this point?
Not yet, Your Honor.
Okay, they can be at this time.
Thank you.
And so, Taylor, just to refresh your memory, we were discussing, my question was when you heard from Chad again after the November 21st conversation.
Yes. He reached out to me on...
Let me stop you.
I'm sorry.
So you're going to be allowed to look at your notes to refresh your recollection, and then you'll have to close them and testify. It's just to refresh your memory.
Okay. He reached out to me on December 10th, and by phone call, and I responded to him on the 11th.
Okay. And I want to just clarify a couple things about the notes and what you provided to law enforcement, if I can. You, as an insurance agent, have a file on your clients. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Did you provide the insurance file or the insurance information to law enforcement?
Everything that I had on Mr. Daybell I gave to.
Okay. Did you make personal notes for your own memory and to be able to recall your interactions with him?
No.
No? Okay.
Your Honor, at this point, I'm going to make an objection that there is a discovery violation. This witness has turned things over to the state that we've not been in possession of.
Sidebar, Your Honor.
Go ahead and finish your
We
objection.
cannot adequately cross-examine her without the information that has been provided to the state. So I would object to her being called as a witness, and I would ask that she be excused.
Well, I'm not going to go that far with the objection at this point. There's been a review of the file made by defense counsel. I guess it's raised an issue which we may or may not need to take up outside of the presence of the jury. Let's have a quick sidebar on that issue, counsel. All right, thank you. At this point, there's been an issue raised as it relates to the file and whether or not it's discoverable evidence in the case. It's been argued to some extent by the defense. The court's going to make an in-camera review of the file to determine whether or not we need to proceed any further with that issue. In order to do that, we'll take the mid-morning break at this time, and we will reconvene at about 1:15 the hour and continue with the direct examination.
All right, please.
Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, we're back on the record on CR 2221-1624, State of Idaho versus Lori Vallow. We had an issue come up with an objection as it related to the file notes of this witness. There was a question, I think, of whether or not discovery had been produced, and as I understand at this point, the parties have resolved that issue. Is that correct, Ms. Rawlings?
That's correct. We were able to provide the Bates number to the defense for where this information was provided.
Okay, and so that takes care of the objection then, Mr. Thomas?
Yes, Your Honor. It looks like it may have been provided to prior attorneys prior to Jim and I coming on, but we don't remember seeing it, but we know that it was Bates stamped, and it is in our discovery.
Okay, with that in mind then, I'll just indicate, because of the nature of the objection made in the presence of the jury, I'm going to provide a curative instruction for the jurors once they come in and remind them that the evidence is to only be considered and that arguments on admissibility of exhibits are not to be considered. So we'll take care of that once the jurors return to the courtroom.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, so, and you have the file back? Okay. Let's go ahead and have the jurors return then, please, Mr. Bailiff.
And let's wait it.
All right, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right, we are back on the record in this matter. Ms. Ballard is still on the stand with direct examination. Ms. Rawlings conducting that examination. Before we start again, I just want to advise the jurors there was a defense raised by, or an objection raised by the defense prior to the break. We've resolved that issue, and I wanted to just remind the jurors, you may or may not remember on the first day of trial you were given a bunch of instructions, and you'll still be getting those later. Among those instructions is an instruction that states specifically, and I'll quote, "At times during the trial, an objection may be made to a question asked a witness, or to a witness's answer, or to an exhibit. This simply means I'm being asked to decide a particular rule of law. Arguments on the admissibility of evidence are designed to aid the court and are not to be considered by you nor affect your deliberations." So please keep that in mind as it relates to that objection, and I would ask you to disregard it as it does not relate directly to what you will consider as evidence in your deliberations. So with that in mind then, Ms. Rawlings, if you'd like to continue with your direct, you can do that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Taylor, do you remember we were discussing, I believe, a phone call that you had with Chad in December 2019?
Yes.
And what can you tell us about that conversation?
He called me because he wanted to make sure to pay his premium for January, and I had told him that I never heard back from him from the email that I sent him with the quotes. And so we briefly went over those options, and he picked a plan and paid for his premium.
During this conversation, did you discuss coverage for anyone other than him at that December call?
Only his son, Mark.
Okay. And did you hear from Chad Daybell again later?
Yes.
When did you hear from him?
I believe it was March 11th, 2020. He came into my office.
What did he want when he came to see you on March 11th?
His original inquiry was to obtain health coverage for his new wife.
Okay. And can you tell us about that conversation?
He told me that he'd gotten married and wanted to get coverage on his new wife. And I asked him when they got married, and he told me that it was November 5th, 2019. And I told him that we were outside of the 60-day window, so that wouldn't be possible. And
okay. Did you discuss what other qualifying events there might be?
Yeah, he told me that she was incarcerated and he was really worried about something happening to her, but that she was supposed to be getting out the following week. And so I said that that's a qualifying event.
Okay. Did you discuss other qualifying events?
Yeah, we talked about moving back to, moving into a state is a qualifying event, or losing coverage elsewhere.
Okay. And when you talked about moving into another state, did you discuss with him where he and his wife had been previously?
Yeah, he told me that they were living in Hawaii and that they had just come back to Idaho.
Okay. Did he ask about coverage for his wife, including dental insurance?
Yes.
And he asked about coverage for his son, Mark?
Yes.
Did he talk about anything else relating to the background of his wife, what her needs would be?
No.
Okay. So let me just break this down a little bit. He talked to you in November about possibly getting married again, right?
Yes.
At that time, he did not ask for coverage for anyone else, though?
Correct.
Okay. Did he tell you back in November anything about this potential new wife?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He told me that she lives in Kauai, and so that they would live there half the year and in Idaho for half the year. He told me that she was a widow and she lived off her husband's Social Security death benefits.
Okay. And so fast forward to March, the March visit, when he was trying to get the insurance, did you ask him if you could double check some information?
Yes.
Okay. Did you notice anything else about Mr. Daybell between your visit with him in November and your visit with him in March?
Physically, I just thought he looked thinner and tanner, which made sense if he'd been in Hawaii.
Okay. Did he tell you who his new wife was?
Yes.
What did he say?
He wrote on a sticky note, Lori Ryan Daybell.
And did he indicate whether there was coverage needed for anyone else?
No.
Did he state whether or not she had any kids?
No.
No, he didn't state it, or?
I went through the application process like I would with anybody, just verifying, is this your phone number, is this your address, etc. And one of the questions is, are there any children? And when I asked that, he said no.
Okay. If I may have just one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
I don't have any other questions at this time.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Rawlings. Mr. Thomas Cross?
Thank you. Yes. Morning, Ms. Ballard. You had filled out some information for Chad to present to the Department of Health and Welfare. Is that correct?
Yes.
And some of that information, I think you said, was had to do with his income because he may qualify for Medicaid.
Correct.
Okay. And what was his income?
I think, I don't remember, this was a long time ago, but I think at the time he had said that his income without his wife's would be around $20,000.
Okay. I went through your notes, and would it refresh your recollection if you went through your notes and looked at that particular?
Definitely.
Okay. Can we give that to her?
And again, I'll just advise the witness that if you're using those to refresh your recollection, don't just read from the notes, but look at them and then close the file once you've done that.
Yes, sir.
And just to kind of speed things along, there's an actual piece of paper that's from Health and Welfare that's attached to those notes or inside that packet.
So Chad told me that they wouldn't have any income, and then Health and Welfare System interfaced $30,000.
$30,000?
Yes.
That was his income for the year?
That's what he was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. We'll have well, let's see if there's any redirect, Ms. Rawlings.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Without any redirect, then, can this witness be excused?
Yes, we would ask that she be released.
No objection.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
with Tony Bruschi.
That was insurance agent Taylor Ballard testifying in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. There's much more testimony to come. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of it. You can get an ad-free experience when you sign up through Apple Podcasts right now. I'm Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.